Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first of the Monday morning breakfast reviews. Something I'm hoping to do every Monday morning, looking back at the weekend's jump racing that's just been. This weekend, well, what a weekend of racing. Really got me excited. I had a big smile on my face all weekend, certainly where the racing was concerned. Starting on Friday at Chepstow, where we had very much national hunt weather. Biblical rain through the afternoon turned the ground to soft with plenty of water kicking around. And I suppose the place to start is the Persian War Novices Hurdle, a race that's been farmed in recent years by Paul Nicholls, and this was no exception really. Captain Teague arrived here as the standout horse coming forward, having finished best of the British in the champion bumper at the Cheltenham Festival, and he duly obliged, I suppose. Made fairly short work of it. I wasn't overly blown away by his jumping. I thought he was plenty novice-y enough in a number of places, but I think, given the post-race comments by Paul Nicholls that this was actually the first time this horse has jumped on grass, I think you can give him a pass with that. Jumping on the carpet fibre surfaces that a lot of these yards have now would be a very different experience for a horse to jumping on the grass. Would certainly have a bit more spring in the carpet fibre, and it would be more secure under their feet. Jumping on turf, obviously, there's a bit more give and a bit more slip to the turf. So I think you can give him a pass there. And as a result, I think it was a perfectly adequate performance. He showed that that engine is definitely still intact this season as it was last. He looked fairly straightforward. He finished very powerfully, and I certainly wouldn't knock the performance at all. Albeit, I don't think the horses that finished in second and third, Resplendent Grey and Knockhouse, are going to be up to all that much this season. I'm sure they'll win novices, but quite how good they're going to be remains to be seen. And I don't think they'll be sort of shaking up any sort of spring festivals, which they might well be hoping to do with Captain Teague, although they did were at pains to point out that it would be very slow this year, and they see him very much as a chaser for the future. I did see prices knocking around for the Cheltenham Festival afterwards, and frankly, I think they're laughable at this time of year. I mean, there'd be very few novices that would interest me at all at this time of the year, and Captain Teague certainly wouldn't interest me for any Cheltenham assignment at the moment. Now, Paul Nicholls said afterwards that it would be one more run and then to the Challow, and I think that's important to sort of reiterate, because I saw a few streams on my social media saying that Nicholls had said it was one run and then the Challow, and slightly implied that this Persian War was that one run. As I understand it, and I think he's pretty clear, it's one more run and then to the Challow. I think that one more run will come at the Coral Trophy meeting, the old Hennessy meeting at Newbury. I think they'll give him a sighter on the track there, and then they'll look to go to the Challow, which again is a race that Paul Nicholls has a great record in. But he has plenty of novices to come out yet. It's by no means a guarantee that Captain Teague will be top of the pick by the time they get there. I'm sure he is high up in their order at the moment, but his jumping definitely needs to brush up. I would think they'll be able to get onto the grass schooling strip at Ditchit now the rain has come, and I'd expect to see him jump better next time, and I would want to see him jump better next time. You know, he had more than enough in reserve to dispatch these, but in a better grader race, he is going to need to jump better to give himself a better chance. The other novice hurdle was a fairly low grade affair, really. The winner, Donica, was rated 110 coming into this. Used his experience to good measure, and a good bit of placing by Nigel Hawke to pick up this pot. The horse that interests me was the horse that finished third, Zonda from John Joe O'Neill's yard. I'd thought before the race, just looking at it, and I'd said on my social media on Friday that for me, this time of the year is time to sit on your hands and watch with a pen and notepad. I think you'll learn far more if you watch rather than punt. But just going into this race, I thought that the Paul Nicholls short price favourite was perhaps one to oppose on the soft ground. There was nothing really in his pedigree or his form that said he'd want or handle soft ground, and I think that was perhaps the case. Zonda would perhaps be in the way I'd have looked if I'd have played in the race. But he caught the eye, but for all the wrong reasons. He just jumped abysmally, barely jumped a hurdle. So the fact that he was still there pitching going to the last is to his credit. He's clearly got an engine, but again at the last he made an absolute hash of it and forfeited all chance really, but plugged on very well. Now, if they can get his jumping organised, I think he's a horse worth following. But for me, it would be a fairly big if. I'll probably side with him next time if conditions are right, but it's not a given that his jumping will just improve for this experience, because he didn't look to get any better as he went round. And for me, it wasn't a sort of lack of concentration. Sometimes these horses can run free and not really look at what they're doing. Didn't seem to be the case with him. He just looked clumsy and uncoordinated, and that might be a slightly longer job for the team down at Jackdaw's Castle to fix, if indeed they can. But he's definitely got an engine. I think he's certainly going to want soft ground, because if they go quicker on better ground, he's going to cause him all sorts of problems, I'd have thought. But he's certainly one that went in my notepad. I'll be interested to see what he can do next time. And then the second place, Artistic Endeavour. He'll be eligible for a mark now tomorrow. So we'll take a look at him in handicap movers and shakers. It'd be interesting to see what the handicapper himself made of that race, with the winner, like I said, rated 110. Be interesting to see what he gets tomorrow, and also Artistic Endeavour. Undoubtedly, the performance of the Friday and arguably the weekend came from Chianti Classico in the novice handicap chase, just shy of 3 miles for Kim Bailey. Now, this is a horse that I absolutely loved last year. I thought he was really impressive, and I thought he'd gone under the radar going into the Albert Bartlett. Actually, I was on him at big prices, and I sort of thought he might just shake up what I thought was an open race, but as it was, he slightly bombed out. I think the atmosphere got to him a little bit, and Kim Bailey's yard weren't in the best of form heading into the Cheltenham Festival. But I was quite heartened to see that he had himself, Kim Bailey, mentioned that Albert Bartlett, that they thought he would be a horse that could have perhaps gone better in that than he did. So he's clearly held in quite high regard. He was this stereotypical horse that you see everywhere. He's the type to make a better chaser. And yet he does have the big imposing physical with plenty of scope that looked like he would be better for fences. But I often think that jumping fences is less about scope and more about their ability to link their brain to their feet. They've got to be more dexterous with their feet. And my one concern with him was that at times last year, he just looked like this sort of numb, relentless galloper. And I just wondered whether he would have the sort of conscience to organise his feet to the fences. And indeed, he went down to the first and slightly ran onto the top of it and didn't make a great job of it. But from there on, he learnt and was very smart, particularly when ridden forward to a big stride. He was very, very capable. But on the occasion, David Bass needed him to go in short. David Bass kept a good hold of his head and sort of gave him plenty of help. But he knew what he was doing. He got the job done. His jumping up the home straight was impeccable, particularly to the last, where Dave Bass saw a really attacking, aggressive stride from 6-7 strides out and punched him down. And Chianti Classico came up for him and got the job done really well. I'd thought beforehand that he was on a mark of 133 over hurdles. I'd thought that perhaps he could improve on that by at least £10, take him up to sort of the mid 140s. And I see nothing here to suggest that's not the case. Pullagren Green, who was third, arrived with race fitness and rated 133. And Chianti Classico dispatched him about 4 or 5 lengths, but value for further than the winning margin. He's going to be adaptable going forward. He's won right-handed at Market Rasen and Wincanton. He's won left-handed at Chepstow on an undulating track. He's won on good to soft, and he's now won on soft. Kim Bailey said that he'll take it quite slowly with him, which tends to be his MO, and I think that's no bad thing with a novice chaser. Let them get plenty of experience jumping bigger fences and see where he goes. But he's definitely a horse I'll be following. I think he's a smart performer, and it would be no surprise to me at all if he were able to shake up some of the better novice chasers later in the season. Another really taking performance came in the Mayor's Novice Hurdle from Alfie's Princess for Sam Thomas and the Potter family. She'd won a bumper last year and then had disappointed, but Sam Thomas's yard struggled for health last year, so I think that can be the cause of that. And she looked mighty here. She was very keen and ran very strong for the entirety of the race on soft ground. I wondered what she would find up the home straight, whether those exertions would take their toll, but they didn't at all. She found plenty for Sam Twiston-Davies. He was plenty aggressive enough on her up the home straight, sent her for home some way out, and in truth, she never looked like getting caught. I think the fact she was able to finish so powerfully, having raced so keenly, means that you have to upgrade this performance. Sam Thomas said afterwards that they're going to try and follow the sort of Love Envoy route, so that tells you the regard he sees her in. And albeit it's early in the season, I think she sets a fairly high bar for the the mares novices in the UK this year. Of course, there's some really smart performers in Ireland, but in the UK, I think it's going to take a good one to get to this level. Given how powerfully she travelled, I think she could drop back in trip. This was 2 mile 3 and a bit. I think she could drop back to 2 miles, provided there was cut in the ground. And I think as long as the ground wasn't too desperate, she could probably go out in trip as well. I was really impressed with her. I loved how she jumped. She seemed to relish jumping a hurdle. And she's a smart mare for Sam Thomas. Then just one other on the Friday that caught the eye in the closing race, the conditional jockey's novice chase, again, just over shy of 3 miles. Puddles in the park. As a son of walking the park, you would expect that he would handle cutting the ground, but I think we can all agree that cutting the ground probably didn't cover the description of the ground at Chepstow on the end of play on Friday. It was very soft, very wet, and I'm not sure he enjoyed it for all that his name has got puddles in it. He didn't seem to appreciate the puddles, but he was still there pitching, turning in. Certainly was a sort of blanket covering the field, and he was bang there. But Isabel Williams, his jockey, went for a run up the inside, saw a good stride to the fourth last, and got a good jump. But unfortunately, the horse in front of her didn't, and she sort of landed on the back of him and had to sit up and just wait and reorganise before she could get going again. And that's at the bottom of the hill at Chepstow, and on that ground, getting going again up a hill on soft ground takes a bit of doing. The horses that finished first and second had by that point scooted clear, and they'd been ridden handy the whole way. And he just looked a bit lost then from 4 out to 2 out. He was racing by himself. He was clear of the fourth, but he was some way behind the second and sort of wandered around a bit and sort of went up and down the spot. But once he got to the second last and the ground levelled out a bit, he finished very powerfully and actually got far closer at the line than you perhaps thought possible at most of the home straight. He's not by any means a superstar, but I think his mark will stay unchanged on perhaps slightly better ground. I think he's going to want quick ground, but on better ground, back at this track in a similar sort of grade, I think he can make amends, and he's certainly one that I'll be looking to keep on side going forward. And then into Saturday at Chepstow, and I think it's worth pointing out that for all the ground was still soft, the ground was better on the Saturday. Chepstow ground staff done a really good job of keeping a nice fresh strip of ground. So it was certainly wet enough underfoot, but it was fresh ground, and it certainly rode better as the day progressed. Sam Thomas picked up on Saturday where he left off on Friday, really, and won the Native River with Stolen Silver, who was having his first try at 3 miles. Now, he'd been a horse that, if you followed him last year, was probably a bit frustrating because the ability was definitely there, but he seemed to make, niggly mistakes throughout his race over 2 mile 4, quite often at Cheltenham in those big handicaps and again at Chepstow. But this 3 mile pace seemed to suit him better. He jumped far more cleanly and showed the improvement for that. He won this off a mark of 150, and he's going to go up a good bit, I should think, to the mid 150s, and that might make life tougher. But if you go back to his Cheltenham run in January last year, he only failed by 2 lengths to give Midnight River £5. Now, Midnight River finished his season really well with a big win at Aintree. He's now rated 156. So with Sam Thomas's yard in better health and better form, I don't think a mark in the mid 150s is going to be beyond Stolen Silver. Sam Thomas has suggested that the Coral Trophy, or the Hennessy as most of us will know it as, is perhaps the next target. And I think that makes plenty of sense. The only concern for me would be when you go back through Stolen Silver's form, all of his best form has come in small fields. And obviously in the Coral Trophy, he's not going to get that. It's going to be a large field. They'll fan out right across the track, going down to the first few fences. And I just wonder whether that perhaps might not suit him. So for all that I can see the logic of going there, I will be surprised if come the day that he would be my selection. But I think a mark in the 150s, mid 150s, won't stop him at some point again later this season. Now, the novice chase saw the return of Nappers Hill on his first start over fences, but he was beaten at a short price by the Dan Skelton trained Unexpected Party. I don't think Nappers Hill jumped all that badly. I thought he was slick in the main. I wondered whether he would perhaps take to chasing, but I think he did. But just turning in, he looked very sort of leaden-footed. An Unexpected Party had taken a good few lengths out of him, sort of turning for home. Whether that was the soft ground, I think Nappers Hill is probably best on on better ground might be the cause. But then to 3 out, he really started to motor, winged 3 out, and from 3 out to 2 out was closing hand over fist and looking like he was going to throw down a real challenge. But that effort petered out really after 2 out, and from 2 out to home, if you were on unexpected party, you were never really, I think, unduly concerned that he wasn't going to see the race out and get the job done. Nappers Hill looked to hang to his left a bit. You could see Harry Cobden had his horse's head pulled round to the right. If you wanted to be extreme and sensationalist, you could query whether there was perhaps a little bit of a wind issue. Sometimes a horse that hangs its head up like that and leans a bit and gets tired has got a respiratory problem. I don't think that was the case. I think it was just simply him getting tired on the slightly softer ground than he would like on a trip that would probably be as far as he wants to go. His best form, his very best form, is at 2 miles. This was just shy of 2.5. And I think he bumped into a horse that had been absolutely primed for the minute in unexpected party. I think the Skelton team will have known that Nichols would not have Nappers Hill fully wound up. They arrived there as a second season novice with plenty of chase experience, and under a typical sort of Harry Skelton aggressive ride, they made the most of the chance. I would certainly have no concern in siding with Nappers Hill if those two were to meet again, particularly on better ground. I think he's going to make a nice novice chaser. Whether he's quite going to get to the heights that he got to over hurdles, I'm not quite so sure. But if you followed him and you've put him in your sort of horses to follow, I wouldn't be giving up on him just yet. I'm sure he can do better yet. The handicap chase was another win for Sam Thomas, finishing off a really good Friday and Saturday for him at Chepstow, as Al Dancer, who'd been lightly raced in recent seasons, won as he liked really. Now he won this off a mark of 148, and that follows on from winning the Sefton last year off a mark of 144, and then slightly disappointing in the Topham off a mark of 149. I'd thought that maybe the soft ground in the Topham was perhaps a little bit of a concern, but it was soft ground here and he coped with it plenty well enough. Plans are now to go back to the Grand Sefton. He's going to go there on a much higher mark than he won it off last year, but course form counts for a lot round the big fences at Aintree. Sam Thomas clearly has his horses in good form, and crucially he said in his post-race interview that he thought he'd left this horse plenty short enough with regards to fitness, and he'd expect there to be plenty of improvement forthcoming. So if that's the case, on a track that you know he likes, he's jumped round there twice in the Sefton and in the Topham, he might well be able to defy a undoubtedly higher mark this time. The Silver Trophy was the feature race of the day at Chepstow, but it was a race that when I looked at it beforehand I thought was very difficult to have a strong opinion in, and I think the result bears that out really. Pyramid Place was really well ridden by Bradley Harris, who's young jockey, getting plenty of chances for Milton Harris, sat off the pace and then came with a late run on a horse that was race fit and has stamina for further than this. It's not a line of form that on first glance I'll be keen to take all that seriously and use all that much going forward. I think if you backed Blow Your Wad, the horse in second, he was again disappointing, and he did this on occasion last year. He doesn't look the most straightforward. He looks a bit quirky, a bit mischievous, carries his head slightly awkwardly, doesn't really concentrate. He missed the last here. And then I thought there was a gap up the rail that Stan Shepherd could perhaps have taken. I saw a few people criticise the fact that he didn't. I think it's actually he knows the horse and knows the horse needs a bit of space, and perhaps trying to go between a challenger and the rail wasn't really there for the taking, so he had to switch and come round, but never really looked like running down the winner. And I think Blow Your Wad might just be one of those horses that will continue to frustrate, will often look like he's going to be better for his next start, different conditions, and I think you might keep finding that he'll always find one too good. Sonny Gino was probably the short price favourite in running. He looked to be going much the best up the home straight, but when his challenge came, he petered out fairly tamely and weakened into third. He has won over a little bit further than this. Whether it was the soft ground that caught him out, I'm not so sure. It was just a bit of a tame finishing effort, but it was his first start of the season, and I'm sure he'll come forward from that, and he might well be interesting in a handicap hurdle, or they might even elect now to see that they've perhaps hit their ceiling over hurdles, and he might well go chasing. But it's not a race that immediately jumps out as screaming to be an awful lot of form there. There were one or two that finished further down the field that I'd be interested to see tomorrow to see what mark they get, and we'll perhaps cover them in handicap movers and shakers. Sunday we stuck to Wales and we moved to West Wales to Ffos Las, where again the ground was soft and testing. Thought the novice hurdle was an interesting contest. Mount Fuji Park looked a real dour stayer in the maker. He's undoubtedly going to be a 3-mile chaser. This was 2 miles 6. And he was off the bridle for pretty much all of the Fosslas home straight, travelling in behind Wrapped Up Till May, the Paul Nicholls short price odds-on favourite, who looked to be going much the best, but probably going towards 2 out. If you were on Mount Fuji Park, you were starting to get pretty optimistic that he was going to get there and get the job done. And conversely, Wrapped Up in May, when he came off the bridle, perhaps didn't find as much as you would have hoped, and didn't finish weakly, but he certainly didn't find an awful lot off the bridle, I didn't think. He looked a big horse. Whether he's a big gross horse, perhaps going to take a little bit longer to get fit, might be the case. But he was perhaps a touch disappointing. But I think they're two nice novices. Wrapped Up Till May had form within the Waterside last year from their bumper campaign. Now the team have ditched it, and the owners have made no bones about the regard they hold that horse in. So I think it's fair to think that Wrapped Up in May can do better yet. And they're two nice horses going forwards for all. I think both of them will be better when they potentially get a fence. The Welsh Champion Hurdle was the feature race of the day, and I thought this was a really smart performance from Kerry Lee's Nameen Lion to win this. He travelled very exuberantly, probably too exuberantly on the ground for a good deal of the race, but then found plenty of pressure up the home straight, jumped very slickly, and crucially stayed straight. Now I reference that because the runner-up, Any Harm in Asking, didn't stay straight. He drifted across towards the far side rail, drifted to his left under a right-hand drive from John Joe O'Neill Jr. And plenty of people thought that was probably the losing of the race. I'm not quite so sure. I think Nameen Lion found plenty and had to do it by himself up the middle of the track. I think if Any Harm in Asking to come alongside him, I'd be in the camp and the view that actually Nameen Lion would perhaps have got down and found a bit more. I was really taken with him. I do wonder whether, on watching it back, John Joe wishes he'd switched his stick through to his left hand, but in his defence, there perhaps was a short run from the back of the last of the line. But I think a jockey of his calibre should have been pulling his stick through into the left hand. Now, whether it would have made a difference, I'm not so sure, but certainly would have given you a better taste in your mouth if you're a punter to see your horse run a little bit straighter. Nameen Lion, they say that they're now going to look towards the Greatwood Hurdle at Cheltenham, and off a mark of 135 here, I don't think the handicapper can put him up all that much. And I can see the hill at Cheltenham suiting him. He had good form at Sandown last year with that stiff finish. The only concern would be whether he'll come down a hill, as you would have to do at Cheltenham. He's not really got that in his CV so far, but there was very little here to suggest that wouldn't suit him. Kerry Lee did reiterate that he would only run if there's cut in the ground, and he's at his best with cut in the ground, but there's every chance he'll get those conditions at Cheltenham for the Greatwood Hurdle. I think he's a really smart horse going forward, and Kerry Lee is year on year a trainer that perhaps never really gets the recognition she deserves. She goes about her job very quietly, very little PR, but if she lines a horse up and gets them there with a chance, they very rarely fail to deliver. So Nameen Lion is certainly a horse I'll be keeping on side, and I think he could progress plenty more this year on ground that's got cut. And then just one more to finish today was an eye catcher in the bumper, the last race of the day, and it was the Evan Williams chain Jackpot Cash. Now he only finished fifth, and he was beaten comfortably, but just coming up the home straight, I thought he was doing it all very nicely. He was finishing powerfully, and then Adam Wedge sort of got stuck in a bit of a gap between two horses. He didn't have physically the horse to get through the gap, and also I think mentally a sort of horse that's tuned up to ping through a gap on bumper debut. Bumper winners are certainly not an MO for Evan Williams and that yard, but he stuck at it really well. He had to sort of snatch him up when the gap closed, then get him going again, and he galloped all the way to the line. He looks like a typical rucker horse, a big, raw individual. He's only 4 years old. I wouldn't have him on my mind for a bumper, and bumpers truthfully aren't something I punt in very often. But if he turned up in a maiden or a novice hurdle, particularly back at this track, he looked like the sort of horse that could perhaps land a little prize like that. So he's got in my tracker for further down the line. And then just one thought to close off with, really, and that's the form of the Paul Nicholls yard. Now, that sounds really quite daft to question the form of the yard when they're running at a 19% strike rate. But I thought, as I've already mentioned, Sonugino, Nappers Hill and Wrapped Up in May all perhaps finished a little bit tamely. And then you throw in that Bo Balco and Danny Kerwin, both at Chepstow over the weekend, finished very poorly. They both stopped very, very quickly. Now, it could be that it's just a coincidence that both of those horses have isolated individual problems, but there was a couple that perhaps just didn't finish their race off as well as you'd have thought. I'm not by any means suggesting there's an issue in the yard and that the yard are wrong, but I think it is worth just reiterating at a time of the year when Paul Nicholls will have plenty of short price favourites. It does tend to be November that he has his team sort of gearing up into top gear. So certainly cause just to look twice if you fancy taking a short price about a Nicholls horse. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the first episode of the Monday Morning Breakfast Review. Please do hit a like and a subscribe. Makes a big difference, so I'm told, to the algorithm of these things, however that works, and that means that hopefully more people will get to see it, more people can give feedback, and the more feedback I get, hopefully the better content I can deliver for you throughout the season. I'll be back tomorrow, Tuesday, for handicap movers and shakers, and then Wednesday for From the Stewards Room, where I have a quick look through the stewards reports from the last week and see if there's any clues to be gleaned from connections as to reasons their horses run well or otherwise. Enjoy your Monday, and I'll see you soon.